It's unbelievable to say that it's cold in church today. After 3 straight months of solid heat, it's really nice. And also I can hear better without the fans blowing real loud and making noise. So it's a good day. So I can preach for an hour now, right? In the year 333 BC, the Greeks conquered everything between Egypt and India. And they had control of all those places for 250 years. The leaders of the Greek people decided that everyone in their realm should share their culture and their religion. And so the Jewish people who were a part of that in the Middle East were told that they had to now worship the Greek gods and the pagan gods. Of course, many of them rebelled, but many of them gave in and went over to paganism. The first reading today is actually written by Jews who turned pagan, and they sarcastically call the just one, meaning the God who the other Jews worshipped. And the reading really reflects Jesus, doesn't it? It says, let us put him to death, let us persecute him, let us see if God will save him. The same things predicted that Jesus talked of in the gospel today was predicted way back then. And in the gospel, Jesus has just been telling the apostles that he's Son of Man is going to be handed over and killed and put to death. And he will rise 3 days later. They just didn't get it. All they heard was kingdom. And kingdom and a king and cohorts and all that kind of stuff. And they all had positions. They were wondering what position they would have in his kingdom. That's why Jesus goes on and says, what were you talking about on the way? Well, they were arguing about who would have the greatest place in the kingdom. And of course, Jesus has to sit them down again and teach them about his kingdom. And he does it so simply. If you want to be great, you have to serve everyone. The greatest servant of all was Jesus Christ, who served everyone by giving his life on the cross for forgiveness of our sins, so that the kingdom of heaven could be open to all of us. And he's saying to his followers, you too must be servants. And he takes a child as an example. In those days, a child had no rights. They were loved, but they had no rights. Unfortunately, it's much the same today. Children not only do not have any rights, they do not even have the right to life in our society. And that's very sad. But he takes a child who's very innocent and places him before them and says that you have to, if you receive one child such as this in my name, you receive me. In other words, he's identifying with the child who's completely dependent upon its parents in humility. And we too must be dependent upon God for all things, just as the child is dependent upon his or her parents for everything. But the Lord's saying along the way that we have to be servants. We have to be servants. Some people who are servants have had great names. For example, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, a simple young nun who decides that she's going to face the challenge of helping all the sick, homeless, and dying people in India. We know the story that follows. She had many followers and founded an order of sisters who continue that work today. She was on Time magazine and spoke before the United Nations and spoke before the whole country in the United States. A great woman, very humble, servant of the poor. We look at the title of the Pope, who has a great position in the church. He's the Servus Servorum Dei. He's the servant of the servants of God. You and I are the servants of God. He's the servant of all of us. And so what do we need to do? We look at service. So many times we see advertising where they offer service. I remember one time when my sink wasn't running right and I thought it was the water pressure, but realized it was something wrong with this faucet. I didn't know how to fix it. So I called the service. The part was 49 cents. The service was $125. Something wrong with this picture. But the point is that we are all called to serve. Parents are servants of their children. They care for them, give their whole lives for them, love them, teach them, clothe them, shelter them, instruct them. Servants, husbands and wives, servants of one another. And look at all the people that serve us, the mailman or woman, the doctors that we go to, and the nurses. All kinds of people serve us. And all that matters. If everyone in all of their jobs takes it as a call from God to serve people, you receive much grace from God for that. Even though you're getting a salary, if you're doing it out of love for people, it makes all the difference in the world. And so today we're just being reminded that we're all called to be servants. And whatever we do in serving God and serving others, that's what Jesus is saying will make us great. We're all headed towards what Jesus described he was headed toward, death. And in the end, the only thing that we can claim as our own are all the acts of love towards God and toward others. It's the only thing that we take with us. We may have made enough money to have a huge monument on our grave, but everybody is dying the same way. And so it's humbling to think of that. But we know that on the other side, Jesus says, and the Son of Man will rise. And we will rise too one day from the dead. And so that gives us great hope. So as servants of the God and servants of one another, we ask the Lord to inspire us each day to show love for him and love for others in the way that Jesus showed that love.